Would you join me with a warm welcome as Desiree Monize from Avenue of Life comes and joins us. Desiree? Desiree, tell us a little bit about, go back. You've not always been in the not-for-profit sector. You were somewhere other than that. And tell us a little bit about your journey from the for-profit world into the not-for-profit world.
Well, I started my journey working with dentists and doctors and partnering with business owners that had a dream but perhaps didn't know how to get to the finish line. And so they would share about, they knew about dentistry, they knew how to run their practice, but they didn't know how to manage a team, hire a team, and maybe design their offices. And so all those little details really started me on my journey in consulting. And I began to work with them in achieving their goals and launched in Newport Beach, California, a consulting agency.
Okay, and how long were you doing that?
I did that for around a decade. We moved into Ohio and started to work in the church sector.
Okay, all right, so in the for-profit world, doing fine, making
Very
a good living.
successful.
Yeah. And then something happened. You got tricked, or what happened?
I really just began to talk with pastors who were wrestling with the same thing. They had a dream, or the Lord had put on the inside of them, where they were to grow their church. And so maybe they were stuck at 50 or 200 and they couldn't get over the mark, and began to question whether or not I could use those same gifts alongside a pastor to take them to where God had put on their heart to go.
And was that working?
It was working. It was a lot of fun. The Lord took me to Texas and then here to Kansas City, and I got on staff with Pastor Fred Heron at the Vineyard.
Okay, and how long were you in that role, and what were you doing there?
I worked with Fred for 5 years, and my role was the equipping pastor, and I had the privilege of mobilizing the congregation and utilizing their gifts and talents to impact their community and the church.
Okay, and did you enjoy it?
I enjoyed it.
So what was the difference in working in the for-profit world versus the not-for-profit world? What were some of the differences that you experienced? Permission to speak freely.
Well, that would be it. It's that watching how we communicate within the church is very important. And in everything we do, being careful that love is the first thing coming out of our mouth. We're in a business sector, you just say what you're thinking, and it's uncensored, and it's okay.
So, and those of you that know Desiree know that she's one of the most capable people I know. She's a type A person. She's a get her done kind of a person. Been very successful in the for-profit world and has brought a lot of those same gifts and skills into the not-for-profit world, and has everything I have seen, and I haven't known her for a long time, but everything that I've seen is that she's kind of navigated that world in a pretty good way. She's learned. She seems to be very measured in the things that she says and when she says them, and I appreciate that a lot. So then you began kind of a journey from working on church staff, and you got kind of waylaid along the journey into a ministry that you didn't intend to become a part of, and you became a huge part of it, and it sort of changed your life. So I want to tell us a little bit about Hope Faith and what was going on there and how you got into that, and I want to kind of move into Avenue of Life.
Well, I love my job within the church, and there was a day in early 2007 that I was heading to Children's Mercy with my intercessory team, and we passed a soup kitchen, and in line we had maybe 100, 200 people that were waiting to get their breakfast, and the Spirit of God spoke to me, and I just remember turning to everyone in the car and saying, I'm going to serve there one day. And they all laughed. We worked a lot of hours within the church, and they said, you're never going to get out there. And as the year progressed and we entered Christmas time, the Lord brought to remembrance that soup kitchen. And so I called the soup kitchen, and my intention was to go in and serve a hot meal. I got my family, some of the members of staff, and really thought, hot meal, I'm done, and this is a great way to spend our Christmas. So that began my journey. And the Lord had a different plan. And the Lord would call me out of the church, and I was offered the job to take the executive director position. And my answer to them was that I was not equipped. Although I sat in the church and shared with members of the congregation how the Lord had equipped them, I would answer very quickly that I was not equipped. I felt out of my element. I was from the burbs, and I'm in the inner city. And there were parts of the demographic we were serving that you wrestled with fear, you wrestled with unknowns, and I just remember even when I took my family in to serve the meal, I said, stay behind the window, stay behind the counter. And I went into the soup kitchen with perceptions on homelessness that the Lord would later begin to change.
And you worked with that ministry for how many years?
5 years.
And you watched it grow from what to what? And what were you doing?
We watched it grow. It was 100% relief. It was a breakfast soup kitchen that had a Bible study, and we served about 150 people. We had 4 partnering churches and maybe about 125 volunteers. And the Lord really had a different plan for that ministry and brought me in just to begin to challenge some of the things that were going on. And I had never looked at the underbelly of the nonprofit world. I had sat inside of the church. Prior to that, I had never been in the nonprofit sector and would begin to see things that were very confusing to me. And we had the same people coming every day, and we had all these nonprofits that were mobilizing within our city, and yet people were not moving forward. And so that began my journey in really looking at how can we do something with all this talent in such a way that is strategic to mobilize people in a forward motion.
And if you look back at that, the work that you did and the numbers of people that were coming through the shelter and that you were servicing, was it going through the roof?
It was. By the close of that year, we were serving 500 individuals. 25 churches were partnered with us with over 800 volunteers. And that was just making a few shifts in listening to what the Lord wanted, and we were getting prepped. The Lord was prepping us for the recession. So the recession would come in 2008, and of course the Lord didn't show me that picture. And the numbers would greatly change. We could not fit in our soup kitchen any longer. But we were the only day center in town, and we needed a day center. We had shelters at that time used to put individuals out on the streets from 6 a.m. until 3 p.m., and we needed a place for them to go. So it wasn't that shutting down the day center would be the answer. We needed to expand. And so while giving was going down and our numbers were rising, we took a leap of faith and found a building. And we asked those that were serving in the soup kitchen line, because we didn't have the resources to pay for individuals to come out, but we had the talent in the soup kitchen line. We said, will you guys help us to build it? And we sat around the table with them, and they began to design the types of services they'd want. And the day we opened the doors, 900 men, women, and children came. And we left in 2013 with 5,000 community partners, 125 churches, serving well over 1,000 men, women, and children each day.
And so by so many standards, success?
People would say we were very successful.
Okay, and so as we talk, kind of moving into this, we're all on a journey, and every one of us. What I said last night is that when we come to this subject, sometimes it's easy for us to look back and feel guilty that maybe we were doing some things wrong, even in the things that we were succeeding. So that's not the point of this conversation here, because where we're going to go right now is Desiree moved on to some other things that she's doing right now, and I want to kind of tease from her some of the things. And I know she's gracious in this, and that part of our learning curve sometimes is to move on from certain things and to move into other things without judgment or anything like that, but just say I can't do some of the things that I really feel I need to do. That's a part of this unfolding understanding of what development is. So you come to a point, am I right, in which you begin wrestling with the long-term effectiveness of what, by all intents and purposes, was a success. And it was successful in some ways, but it was missing some stuff. So talk about what was missing and what was going on inside of you as you're trying. You could have stayed in that little space forever. But something wouldn't let you stay in that space. What's going on?
Well, there were so many people just speaking over our team about how successful we were in distributing relief. And we had really moved the needle towards betterment during this time. And we were, working on coaching and mentoring, and we were seeing better results. But the same people that were in my line when we were serving 150 were still in our line 5 years later. And we had spoke with so many that had been, utilizing the shelter services and emergency aid for well over a decade without moving forward. Yet many were educated, many had a resume that it just didn't make sense that they weren't moving forward. So why were we not moving them forward? And so as we began to look at that as a team, we were part of the problem. And I wanted to move into community development. I had this opportunity. I got a call from a city official, and they had on a specific corner that had the highest level of crime in our neighborhood. And we had prostitution, drugs, stabbings. It was just a rough neighborhood. Even the guys that worked in our center were cautious about going by that corner. And they asked if we'd consider taking that corner back. And so we went out to our suburban churches and we said, would you be interested in helping us renovate these buildings and put some of our community leaders into this corner? And maybe we could do a community garden and beautify it so that we could change the face of what's going on. And that would be the first time I touched into community development. And I was hooked. It was something different. I saw the community change. I saw the people that worked on that, just as we had with our day center. Once again, I saw community leaders work on that corner and take ownership of that corner. And there was just something very different about that, and I wanted to explore that a little further.
Did you have words for it at the time?
I did not have words for it at the time. I actually didn't have words for it until I ran into you and Jonathan one day in the foyer of Church of the Res, and you began to speak a language that really spoke to my heart. And I had been in that angst without really knowing how to communicate what was going on the inside of me, but I knew that was not enough, and it's not where I wanted to stay.
And what I find so interesting about this, and I'll talk a little bit about this tomorrow, is that one of the things that I've observed in just the process of spiritual formation in all of our lives, to what I would call redemptive entanglement. I mean, God means for us to be redemptively entangled in the problems and in the restoration and the redemption of this world, and we're all wired a little differently, and we're called to be redemptively entangled in different ways. And that for all of us, we go through a process of exposure that leads to engagement, that leads to entanglement. And it doesn't matter whether we're talking about community development with a highly successful type A personality that steps into an exposure type of thing, that if you stay in the process, you get engaged to other things. You get engaged at a certain level and your eyes begin to open, and it's a process to see and to understand. And eventually you come to that thing where you go, oh my goodness, I cannot not be involved. And it is an awakening that happens. And so part of what we're trying to do through SAT Talks is just acknowledge the fact that the human journey is one of exposure, engagement, entanglement. And are we free to allow ourselves to grow in what that entanglement might look like? And if we are entangled in things that lead to dependencies, might we not need to look at some other things, find other ways to become entangled in things that don't lead to it? So, I love in Desiree's story is that incredibly successful, and yet there was something a little bit missing. And then the first time you experienced that, and then you begin to see this translate not just into a project, but you can begin to see this translated into the lives of a few individuals. You've got a couple of men that you have walked this journey with now that were products of a continuum that got them to a place of human flourishing. Tell us about one of those.
Well, I have 3 of them that are still with me today. They're on staff and they are employed, that I met early on in the soup kitchen line. So when we were a small little place of 150, they walked in the door to get coffee or donuts, and love to hear their stories. It makes me smile. 2 of them were outside campers. They had been outside, one of them for 2 decades. The other had been an electrician for 30 years before an addiction set in. And Andre, who I'd like to share about today, he came through the door after incarceration. He had 20 years of being addicted, and he was known in our city. He was a gun runner, he moved drugs, and he had been in and out of incarceration. So all my police officers knew him very well, and he came into our transitional program. And we began the journey in 2009 together.
And how is he doing right now?
Today, he has custody of his son. He's in his 3rd year of college. He's the first in his family to go to college. He's our director of our business training center, and employs 11 individuals that have previously been incarcerated. and he negotiates deals. He's working with vendors. He's brokering our commodities, and we have a recycling business, and these men all are a part of it, and they own it. They help to renovate the place, and they own it, and they work for Andre, and he is flourishing. He's doing exceptional.
Yeah, and so you see it happen in a little project on a corner, and you begin to say, oh my goodness, what happens when the community owns this? It creates a space in which human flourishing happens. And then you see it happen in a few individuals, and it sort of puts in you the bug. How can we scale this up a little bit? How can we, okay, and in the meantime, certain doors close and other doors open, and you move from Kansas City, Missouri over to Kansas City, Kansas. And now tell us what you do and give us the elevator pitch for Avenue of Life.
Well, we moved to Wyandotte knowing that it was the highest level of poverty in Kansas and that there were great needs within the community, and we had a great love. We have 60 dialects in our school district, so it's truly doing ministry with the nations, and it's just a fantastic neighborhood. And it was something different from what I was doing in Kansas City, Missouri, but we wanted to go into the neighborhood the right way this time. And so we began meeting with community leaders. We wanted to know what they had in their community and where they thought the gaps were. How could we come in and be a blessing, and how could we be a part of maximizing what they already had? And so our meetings began with asset mapping, finding out what was already there, and how we could come alongside to perhaps empower that.
And right now tell us about your equipping center, and tell us what are the ministries going on, how is God blessing that, and while you're doing that, God has given Desiree and the work that she's doing with Avenue of Life just favor in a lot of different ways, because the city's also made available to her a building out of which they've started a business, and they've even made a part of that building available to the co-op so that we can start a little automotive business. So tell us, because the trajectory now is different. The trajectory of Avenue of Life and what she's doing is not just helping people out of their current circumstances. They're putting into place some things that are creating jobs for people. And tell us about the equipping center. Tell us about the MoDOT building and what God's doing.
Well, we knew when we were running Avenue of Life, or Hope Faith, that many people were saying, we just love that there's an on-ramp, that there's a place to come and serve. And we had such a large number of volunteers, so we wanted to have an on-ramp for service when we launched Avenue of Life. We just wanted to do it a little differently. We knew that housing, economic development, healthcare, and education were the buckets that were going to empower a community and create change. So how could we create on-ramps that had that as the end bucket? And so we launched 4 programs with Avenue of Life, and one of them is the Business Training Center. And that, again, we got great favor with our city in Kansas City, Missouri, and several believers that were on city council asked if we would take a risk. And we said, yes, we will. And they wanted to see the mattresses diverted out of the landfill. So we began to research. My son and I researched, were other people doing this? What did this take? And they gave us a building. We have it for 20 years at $500 a year.
How many square feet?
It's 40,000 square feet on 4.9 acres. And it was a building that they planned to demo. So all of the materials on that land would have went into the landfill. And so the Mark Solid Waste District partnered with us and invested in this mattress recycling, and we launched in November of 2014.
And what's it doing now?
And today, we knew that it'd be a 3-year strategy to get to self-sustained. And in their first 6 months, the guys sold over $40,000 worth of commodities, so they were very proud of that. But now they're at a place where they have a rhythm, and they're strategizing about how to get the highest cost when they're selling their commodities. And I'm watching these roundtable discussions, and it has developed into something that is phenomenal. It really is. We will launch new initiatives this year out of that site.
So briefly describe, just real quickly, the commodities you're talking about. So what happens with a mattress recycling, and how do you turn that into a business?
Well, mattress recycling, inside of a mattress, when they deconstruct the mattress, there is metal, foam, padding, cotton, shoddy, cardboard, plastic, and we can bale these products and sell them, and they're used for maybe carpet or different items. So we sell those with several end market buyers, and that brings back in the income to pay for the wages of those that are working.
And how many are working?
We have 11 on that site.
11 on that side. So if what Michael was saying is true, is that people are poor because they're excluded from networks of productivity and exchange, then what could happen? What would happen if we as the church tried to figure out ways that we could create opportunities for human flourishing, where people could be included in networks of productivity and exchange? And I would suggest to you that this business center, that what Desiree has done is she has done something for those 11 or 12 employees that they couldn't do for themselves. She's created the opportunity and the place for human flourishing. And just to hear her describe it, I mean, they're having roundtable discussions. They own that sort of thing. It's not Desiree running this. Who's running it?
It's our team running it. They're the ones who have come up with the initiative for this upcoming year. They want to sell the recycled wood. We take it to Lee Summit. They make it into mulch. They sell the mulch. But our team said we could do something different with that and bring in more income. So a lot of them are woodworkers, and some of them are artistic. And so they're going to begin making a variety of different signs and chairs and potter plants and everything. They have an entire list of things that they want us to sell this year. And they've designed it, and they proposed it, and we are moving forward.
Okay, and I want to underscore this again. So Mid-America Regional Council, anybody that's involved in the city knows it's called MARC, M-A-R-C. Mid-America Regional Council is the group that made this building available to. And so they work in the whole Mid-America region. I mean, it is a very powerful entity. And I find it so interesting that when a part of our community, a secular part of our community, got to looking around and asking the question, who do we think could deliver on this? They found a faith-based organization who unapologetically believes in her faith and the difference they could make, and it didn't matter to them. They were just interested in somebody who could deliver something, because we all care about the goodwill of people within our communities. And I'm finding over and over, tell me about your experience, but I'm finding over and over again that some of this hand-wringing that we as Christians do over the culture, minimalizing us and putting us in the margins, I don't find it to be the case. I find that if we show up with humility and capacity and a willingness to work with others, and we're an answer to a question that they're asking, that they want us at the table. What's your experience?
I would agree. We have been at all the recycling conferences. We've won the award for Missouri for Recycling with Excellence. And they have given us the platform. We've been interviewed in Greenability with the Kansas City Star, and all of that came from them wanting us to move forward and share that we're a faith-based organization, and yet we are working in the recycling arena. So.
All right, and then we're going to go through some Q&A in just a second, but I want you to talk a little bit about what you're doing right now at Avenue of Life and the ministries that are involved there. But what's begun to happen is that as this spirit of collaboration and the ability to deliver on collaboration, and I want to say that again, that we like to talk about collaboration, but can you deliver on collaboration? Can you bring people to the table to work together in a way that gets to some results? If you can do that, people want to work with you. And Desiree is becoming more and more known in the city as somebody who can deliver on collaboration. She doesn't just convene groups to talk about collaborating. She can pull them together. She can work through the hard work of coming up with a shared agenda and how we're going to measure success and that kind of stuff. And so it's led into some stuff on homelessness, housing, and a couple of other things that are pretty exciting. What's going on. The city now, is it the city or the state, is talking with you about some stuff. So talk about Avenue of Life, what's going on there, and then this latest scenario with the housing and youth.
Well, we moved into Avenue of Life in a Salvation Army building on 7th and Sandusky after searching the city and really just praying about where the Lord would have us. And we wanted to be exactly where He called us to be, because we knew that we wanted to go out from that building and impact block by block our neighborhood. So we knew overall our strategy with housing, we wanted to have it with wraparound, comprehensive services that allowed for the emotional, mental, spiritual, and physical needs of an individual, that was focused on community development, that equipped and that allowed an on-ramp for our churches to come out. And so where the building was located was a big deal for us. And once we secured the building, CrossFirst came in and offered us a loan a brand new nonprofit, and we got the building for a very small sum and had a great deal of favor in that. And then the body of Christ came and the community came and we began to renovate. And what the Lord called us to do in that particular building is first we started in the chapel. And since the chapel has been open, there have been 4 church plants. One was Bhutanese, one's Latino, and 2 multicultural. 3 are still in the building. And then the Lord put on our heart to do computer labs so we could teach from beginners to advanced digital literacy. And we partnered with Connecting for Good and Geeks for God, and we're able to provide ESL, GED classes within that computer lab. We knew that we were supposed to launch a barbershop. We were asked by many of our leaders in the community to consider it, that we could use it for training, and ethnic hair sometimes is very costly, and so it'd be a great blessing for those that were homeless if we could mobilize people to help them to get their hair done at an affordable price. So we put in the barbershop in partnership with Colonial Presbyterian, and we sat there and didn't know what the Lord would do. And today we have an individual that I had met in the soup kitchen line in Kansas City, Missouri in 2009. He is on staff running the barbershop and teaching others within that site right now. So that's very exciting. We know that we'll move into teaching him how to launch his own barbershop, because ultimately that's his goal. He just wants to know, how do I run the business? I'm skilled at what I do. How do I run a business? And so I'm working side by side with him on launching his own business. So he'll be with us a short time, but the Lord's using the barbershop to be a bouncing board for many to come in and learn how to run their own business. And then we have multiple large space rooms. We have a commercial kitchen. I did not want to do a kitchen this time around. I thought, line in the sand, and the Lord said otherwise. When we interviewed our community, there were not dinners being offered in our city, and they asked, would you do this? If the body of Christ will come out, could you provide community meals? And so we were strategic in how we did that. If an individual's in programming, or they're with a pastor, case manager, coach, or mentor that's walking alongside them, where they have an end goal that somebody is helping them to get to where they want to go, and I'm just not going to put a hot meal through the window. That felt a little different, and I thought, I can do this. Let's do community meals instead of soup kitchen, and let's provide a place for the entire family. Let's look at our child care center, and could we have art and music and after-school tutoring? And we began to mobilize the body of Christ to provide a child care center while the parents were upstairs learning different trades. And the community asked, could you bring clinics in? We would love to have professional physical therapy offered in our community, and we did not have a physical therapy clinic that those that were low income or homeless could seek services. And so we had an individual come out of Johnson County, used to making $150 an hour, and she now offers a sliding scale physical therapy clinic. The community asked us, we have grants for foster care children and children in crisis, but some of our grants might not pay for their siblings or their parents, and we know that they could really use trauma care. And so we mobilized Westside Family Church to come in, and they launched a counseling center. It's on a sliding scale, so all of our families do pay a certain amount of money based on what they have, and we are able to provide comprehensive care to the rest of the family. And we know that that brings about healing, which will propel them forward.
So part of what I want you to hear in this is that as we kind of step into this reality that there could be more that we could be doing, is that it takes a leader that can begin to think, how do we leverage the relief and betterment? And how do we put it in a larger continuum? And I was talking with somebody at the break about some of the relief and betterment stuff that they're doing and whether or not maybe they should stop doing that. I'm not sure that the answer is always that we should stop. But to borrow what Jonathan said earlier, is do we know how long we should be doing it and why we should be doing it and where we should be doing it? How do we put it in a continuum? And what I've noticed in Desiree's life is that she's still doing relief and betterment, but she is doing more than relief and betterment. And so maybe the answer to some of the stuff we're talking about is not less, but more. Not more of the same, but more of something else. And the work becomes more complicated and difficult, because now you have to mobilize people for the harder stuff, not the low-hanging fruit, but how do you do the more difficult things to move people through that whole process. So we're going to go into Q&A, but before we do that, if churches wanted to get involved with what you're doing, is that possible?
Absolutely. We actually are ran by the church, we're ran by volunteers, and My board is made up of church pastors. You rotate in. If you're a local pastor, you can rotate in and be part of overseeing Avenue of Life. It will always belong to the church. We're just an outreach arm for the church to get creative and think of ways that they can impact their community in a strategic way. If you're thinking about putting a peanut butter sandwich out your car window, talk to agencies within the city and see if perhaps that same money can be used in a way. Maybe they have a strategy, maybe they have things that you could come alongside, and together our funds make a huge difference. So we're here for the body of Christ, and we're here for you to express yourself. And if there's something that the Lord's put on the inside of you and you've wanted to teach it or be a part of what's going on in the inner city, that building is there for you to express the gifts on the inside of you. So anything from putting a hot meal out the window to teaching an entrepreneurial class, to interview skills, resume writing, all of that's available. It's up to what the Lord has moved on the inside of you, and you're free to express that within our building.
So, would you join me in giving a big thank you to Desiree and what she's doing? So.